My friends, I've got to ask, why have we not solved racism? Racism is one of the most talked about issues in the modern world. You hear it on the media, you hear it at the schools, the workplaces, you hear about it in politics, online, and everyday conversations. And yet, despite all this attention, despite decades of discussion, policies, programs, and movements, it often feels like it's getting worse. That we're more divided, not less. So maybe the most important question isn't how much we're talking about racism. Maybe the question is how we're thinking about it. What if we've been trying to solve racism the wrong way? What if the mindset we're using to address it is actually preventing us from seeing the real solution? As human beings, we have a tendency to focus on what's visible and uncomfortable, the symptoms of our problem, rather than stepping back and asking what's actually causing it. Think of it like this. It's like trying to get rid of smoke without putting out the fire. You can open windows, you can install fans, and you can spray an air freshener. The room might feel better for a moment, but as long as the fire is still burning, the smoke will keep returning. Racism works the same way. We keep trying new ways to manage how racism shows up. New language rules, new policies, new programs, new trainings, without confronting the underlying belief that produces it in the first place. And that belief is this, that humanity is divided into different races. So this raises an important question. Why did we even believe in races in the first place? Why did we add an S to the word race, turn it into something plural, when science tells us there is only one? We didn't correct this idea once we understood more about genetics, biology, and human origins. The concept of races did not come from science. It came from history, politics, and social convenience. At different points in time, dividing humanity into categories made it easier to justify power, hierarchy, colonization, and exploitation. Labels were created first, and meanings were assigned later. Once those labels existed, they were passed down socially, culturally, and institutionally long after the original justifications collapsed. And even when science caught up, when genetics clearly showed that humanity is one, we kept the old framework anyway. We updated our technology, we updated our medicine, but we never fully updated our understanding of human identity. So instead of aligning our thinking with scientific reality, we kept reinforcing an outdated idea, one that no longer reflects what we know to be true. And as long as we continue to think in terms of races, racism will always have something to attach itself to. Because racism doesn't require hatred to begin, it only requires categories. Racism is not solved by endlessly talking about race. From a scientific perspective, there is only one human race. From a scientific perspective, there is one human race. Modern genetics has made clear beyond any serious doubt that DNA differences between people with different skin colors are no different than characteristics of being tall or short, having blonde hair, brunette hair, or black hair. Skin color itself is simply an adaptation to geography and sunlight. It developed over thousands of years as human beings migrated and adapted to different environments. It is not a marker of intelligence. It's not a marker of morality. It's not a marker of human worth. Yet racism survives because we kept teaching people, sometimes subtly, sometimes explicitly, to see themselves as separate groups rather than members of one human family. When a society constantly emphasizes racial categories, it unintentionally keeps the illusion alive. And once that illusion exists, comparison follows. Hierarchy follows, suspicion follows, and resentment follows. Here's a key insight that changes everything. You cannot hate a race once you realize it doesn't exist. Once you truly understand that humanity is one, biologically, scientifically, and fundamentally, racism loses its foundation. Indeed, racism has no air to breathe because we've taken the oxygen out of that room of racism, out of that room that says there's a thing called races. Now, this does not mean that we ignore injustice. It does not mean that we're pretending history didn't happen. It does not mean dismissing real suffering. History does matter, injustice matters, and pain matters. But there is an important difference between acknowledging injustice and cementing division. When solutions are framed around permanent racial identities, collective guilt on one side and permanent victimhood on the other, we risk freezing people into categories that were never real to begin with. We end up reinforcing the very framework that racism depends on. Healing does not come from endlessly ventilating the room. It comes from putting out the fire. Justice works best when it is grounded in shared responsibility, not inherited blame. Compassion works best when it's rooted in common humanity, not competing identities. This doesn't mean accountability disappears. It means accountability becomes constructive rather than corrosive. It becomes focused on repairing harm, restoring dignity, and building trust, rather than assigning permanent labels. This is where a deeper moral and spiritual perspective becomes essential. Spiritual teachings from around the world clearly state that humanity is one, not symbolically, not as a future hope, but as a present reality. If humanity is one, then racism is not just immoral, it's irrational. It's a belief built on a misunderstanding of who we are. When that misunderstanding is corrected, when people truly see themselves as members of one human family, the foundation that racism rests on begins to dissolve. Unity is often misunderstood. Unity does not mean sameness. Unity does not erase culture, history, or individuality. Unity is not uniformity. Humanity can be one family while still celebrating different cultures, languages, traditions, and experiences. The problem arises when differences are mistaken for division, when variation is turned into hierarchy, when diversity is used to assign value. This is where racism takes root. Racism is not a natural instinct, it is a learned belief. And learned beliefs can be unlearned. This is why education matters so deeply. Not just education about history, but education about identity. If children are taught early, scientifically, socially, and morally, that humanity is one, prejudice loses its foundation before it ever forms. They still learn history, they still learn about injustice, but they learn it through the lens of shared humanity rather than inherited division. Imagine a world where every child grows up hearing one simple truth. You are part of one human family. Every person you meet is your relative. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally. In such a world, racism would need to be constantly fought. It would struggle to exist even in the first place. Because when people stop seeing each other as categories and start seeing each other as human beings, something fundamental shifts. Language softens, assumptions weaken, fear loses its grip. Racism is not cured by louder accusations. It is not cured by shaming. It is not cured by dividing people into smaller identity groups. Those approaches may feel satisfying in the moment, but they rarely extinguish the fire. Often they just move the smoke around. Racism is cured by clear truth. And the truth is simple, even if it challenges you. There is no white race. There is no black race. There's no brown race. There's only the human race. When we truly internalize the truth, not just intellectually, but emotionally and socially, our systems change, our language changes, and our relationships change. Unity is not naive. Unity is practical. Unity is the most realistic solution humanity has ever been offered. Because when people stop seeing each other as categories and start seeing each other as a family, racism doesn't need to be defeated. It simply fades away.